The Krepthalan Empire had ruled the galaxy for 17,000 years. Their ships moved between stars like silver tears through the void. Their warriors were bred for battle from hatching, and their fire could melt tungsten at 100 paces. They had conquered 400 civilized worlds, absorbed 73 lesser species, and crushed 12 rebellions before they reached the small blue planet called Earth. The humans surrendered within 6 months. Jackson Mercer watched the Krepthalan occupation cruiser descend over New Seattle from his workshop window, its massive shadow swallowing entire city blocks. He was 63 years old, his hands calloused from 4 decades of woodworking, his hair more silver than brown. While others fled to the shelters, he simply returned to his workbench and continued carving. The Toymaker had survived economic crashes, the death of his wife, and the slow decline of his craft in an age of 3D printed plastics. He supposed he could survive aliens too. The Krepthalan were magnificent and terrifying. They stood nearly 9 feet tall, their scales ranging from deep crimson to obsidian black, their wings folded against their backs like lethal cloaks. They had eyes like molten gold and voices that rumbled like distant thunder. They established their garrison in what had been Seattle's financial district, and humans learned quickly to bow their heads and step aside when the conquerors walked past. Jackson's shop was in the old quarter, a cramped little storefront between a closed bakery and a shuttered bookstore. He kept working because he didn't know what else to do. The Krepthalan had no interest in wooden toys. Neither did most humans anymore. But his hands needed to stay busy, and the smell of sawdust and varnish was a comfort. 3 months into the occupation, the bell above his door chimed. Jackson looked up from the rocking horse. He was saddened to see a Krepthalan child standing in his doorway. She was small, perhaps only 7 feet tall, with scales the color of new copper that caught the afternoon light. Her wings were still developing, folded tight against her narrow back, and her golden eyes were wide with curiosity rather than conquest. She wore the simple tunic of a civilian, not the armor of a warrior caste. She began in halting English, her forked tongue struggling with the human syllables. I am Orla, I saw, the things you make in the window. Jackson set down his sandpaper slowly. His first instinct was fear. The Krepthalan had executed humans for lesser offenses than speaking incorrectly to their young. But the child looked nervous, almost fragile despite her size. You like toys? He asked carefully. Orla's head bobbed in a gesture that might have been a nod. On my world, before we became warriors, we had makers of joy things. My grandmother told me stories, but that was many ages ago, before the Empire needed only soldiers. Something in her voice, longing perhaps or sadness, made Jackson's decision for him. He gestured to the shelves lined with his creations, carved animals, pull toys, puzzles, marionettes. You can look around if you'd like. For the next hour, Jackson watched as Orla explored his workshop with the wonder of a child discovering snow for the first time. She picked up each toy with surprising gentleness, her clawed hands delicate despite their size. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes, when she made a wooden acrobat flip on its bars. She sat cross-legged on his floor, her tail curled around her, and worked at a sliding block puzzle with intense concentration. Why do you make these? She finally asked. Your people have devices that think, that show moving pictures, that connect minds across distances. Why make simple things from dead trees? Jackson considered the question while he brewed tea, 1 cup for him, 1 for the dragon child who could probably incinerate him with a breath. Because there's something honest about it, he said. When you hold something made by hand, you're holding someone's time, their attention, their care. A machine can make 1,000 toys in an hour, all identical, all perfect. But each piece I make is unique. The grain of the wood, the way the light hits it, the small imperfections, they make it real. Orla's golden eyes studied him. We used to believe something similar, before the Empire decided that efficiency was more important than soul. She visited again the next day, and the day after that. Jackson learned that Orla was the daughter of a garrison commander, brought to Earth as part of her education in administration of conquered worlds. She was expected to follow her father into military service, to continue the Krevthaland tradition of expansion and domination. But she was also curious, intelligent, and desperately lonely. The Toymaker and the Dragon Child formed an unlikely friendship. Jackson taught her about Earth, not the conquered, defeated Earth that her people saw, but the Earth of stories and seasons, of human persistence and quiet dignity. He showed her how to work wood, guiding her clawed hands to feel the grain, to understand how the material wanted to be shaped. She was a quick learner, patient despite her warrior heritage. Orla taught him about the Krevthaland, about a culture that had sacrificed beauty for strength, art for conquest, childhood for endless war. She spoke of her grandmother's forbidden stories about the age of making, before the military coup 17,000 years ago had transformed her people from creators into destroyers. "We used to make beautiful things," she told him one afternoon while attempting to carve a bird from cedar. "Ships that looked like poems, buildings that sang in the wind, gardens that bloomed in vacuum. Then we decided that only strength mattered. We tore it all down and built an empire instead." "Do you think that was worth it?" Jackson asked quietly. Orla's hand stilled on the half-formed bird. "We rule 400 worlds. We have never lost a war. We are feared across the galaxy." She looked up at him. "But I have never seen my father smile." 6 months into the occupation, Orla stopped visiting. Jackson tried not to worry, but worry came anyway. He kept working, kept his shop open, kept carving despite the emptiness. Then 3 weeks later, his door chimed at midnight. Orla stood in the darkness, and she had been crying, a fact made obvious by the scorch marks on her tunic where her tears had burned through the fabric. "My father discovered where I had been going," she said. "He was very angry. He said I had been contaminated by human weakness, that I had dishonored our family. He is sending me back to Krevthala for re-education." Her voice broke. "They will make me into a proper warrior. They will burn out everything that makes me, me." Jackson's heart ached for her. "When do you leave?" "Tomorrow." She pulled something from her tunic, the cedar bird she had been carving. She had finished it, and it was beautiful, graceful, imperfect, real. "I wanted you to have this, to remember that at least one Krevthaland learned that strength is not the only thing that matters." The old Toymaker took the bird with reverent hands. Then he went to his desk and pulled out a small wooden box he had been working on for weeks. It was made from maple and cherry, inlaid with intricate patterns, fitted with hidden joints that made it seem almost magical when it opened. "For you," he said, "to remember that making things can be a kind of courage too." They stood together in the darkness of his workshop, the conquered and the conqueror, both of them crying. "Thank you, Jackson Mercer," Orla whispered, "for teaching me that there are kinds of strength that do not destroy." She left before dawn. Jackson never saw her again. The occupation lasted another 3 years before the Krevthaland mysteriously withdrew from human space. The historians debated the reasons: economic, political, military. But Jackson noticed something in the reports. The withdrawal had been ordered by the new empress, who had ascended to power through a bloodless coup. The new empress who abolished the warrior breeding programs. The new empress who ordered the construction of museums and gardens on the conquered worlds. The new empress whose first decree had been the restoration of the age of making. The new empress whose name was Orla. 15 years after the occupation ended, Jackson received a package from the stars. Inside was his maple and cherry box, returned to him, along with a handwritten letter on paper made from Krevthaland reed trees. "Dear Jackson," it read, "I am building a new empire, one that creates instead of destroys. Your box sits on my desk and reminds me every day why I fight. I wanted you to know, the girl you taught to carve has learned to carve a new future for her people. History will remember you not as a conquered human, but as the one who helped save an entire civilization from itself. Thank you for everything. Orla. Jackson Mercer placed the letter on his workbench and picked up his tools. There was still so much left to make.